Hi, welcome to section 11.3, Solving Quadratic Equations by the Quadratic Formula. Hopefully by the end of this, you will be able to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So let's start with the quadratic formula. If you just start out with a standard form, and that's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Nice standard form. We're going to get to the quadratic equation, which looks like x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, how do I get that crazy formula from my starting equation? So I want to do the derivation of it so that you all know where it comes from and how it got there, okay? So what I would do if I had a standard form equation just like this is I would be doing completing the square. With completing the square, if you have any coefficient next to the x squared, you divide everything by that coefficient first. So I'm going to divide everything by a at the beginning. A divided by a is 1, so I'll just have x squared. I've got a b over a times x, and a c over a over here, and 0 divided by a is 0. The next thing I would do is get my coefficient to the other side. So I'd have x squared plus b over a times x plus blank for that completing the square step, and then I would subtract c over a to the other side, okay? Now we need to fill in the blank for the completing the square. So remember, for completing the square, we have that a squared plus 2ab plus b squared format. So the x comes from that x squared. That's my a value. And so to get my b value, my little b, what I'm going to do is take half of this. I'm going to divide this by 2. And b over a divided by 2 would be b over 2a. So then for this completing the square step, I'm going to add that squared. So if I do b over 2a squared, well, that would be b squared over 4a squared, because I would square the b, square the 2, square the a. Whatever I add to one side, I should add to the other side so that my equation stays in balance. Okay? From there, I could factor the left side. So my a value was x, my sign is a plus, my b value was b over 2a. On the right side, I would probably try to get a least common denominator so that I could actually add my fractions together. So my least common denominator would be 4a squared. So I would take the first fraction and multiply it by a 4 and an a to get there. So that would be negative 4ac over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. Then I can actually add them together because they have the same denominator. So when I add them together, I could either have the negative 4ac plus b squared, or I could do b squared minus 4ac. I'm going to choose to do the second option because it looks more like the formula I'm going for. Okay. Alright, at this point, what I have is x plus b over 2a, and that whole thing is squared, equals b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. I know it looks really complicated, but if we were doing completing the square, we would be using that square root property to undo the squaring on this side to get x by itself. So we're going to take the square root of both sides, and we will do the positive or negative square root so we can get both answers. On the left side, the squaring and square rooting will undo each other. We'll have x plus b over 2a. On the right side, well, I can't really do much about the numerator. Even though b squared is squared, we have a minus sign in here, so it's just going to be what it's going to be. It's going to be the positive or negative square root of b squared minus 4ac In the denominator, the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of a squared is a. So we can take that square root, and why not, okay? Last thing, to get the x by itself, well, the opposite of adding would be subtracting. So I'm going to subtract b over 2a from both sides. Okay, so now I've got x equals, and now I have the option of putting this kind of in front or in the back. It doesn't matter because it's commutative, but I want to get that quadratic formula. I want to show you where it comes from. And they have the opposite of b first in the front, so that's where I'm going to put this. So I'm going to do negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we'll notice that they have the same denominator, so why not go ahead and combine them together? And that's what we'll do. X equals negative b, or the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over that common denominator of 2a. And we have arrived, guys. This is where the quadratic formula came from. It's from completing the square.